We have finally reached the end of this series. Over the last couple days to about a week ago, we have started revisiting every single best and worst weapon in every chapter of Fortnite. Of course, starting from chapter 5, and here we are at our final destination, the worst weapons in all of chapter 1. As I've said in like all these videos, there are hundreds and hundreds of weapons and items in every single season, so to pick just 8, 9, 10 that are bad is really difficult. But I don't know, I think I've got a pretty good list going here, and you're going to want to stay till the end because I promise you there are some controversial takes throughout this video. If you go on to enjoy this video, be sure to leave it a like. Use code TYFRYZ in the Fortnite item shop. I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who has tuned into all of this series. It's been a great couple of videos that I really enjoyed making, and ranking every AR may or may not be in the works. I'm not going to say any more. But of course, with all that being said, let's get right into this. All right, we are actually going to start and combine the preseason and season 1 together. Basically just the weapons that launched with the game, right? Were there any that were pitifully bad? And the answer to that question is yes, absolutely. And one of those is the SMG. And of course, guys, this is not the SMG that you guys all know that was introduced in chapter 1, season 5. We're not talking about that one. We're talking about the one that kind of looks like a, I guess if you're familiar with COD, like a Tech 9 a little bit. Let me just say something. This thing was absolutely brutal. And I would be really surprised if, I don't know, even 10% of the people that watch this video ever use this weapon. I mean, I've been playing this game since the day it came out, and I've only used it a couple times. And that's because it was barely in the game. It was only in the game for the preseason, season 1, and then by the time season 2 came around, it got vaulted. When it launched, it was doing 11 damage. While, yes, it did have a fire rate of 15, the accuracy was brutal. I think the gameplay will show it. It was like basically what the machine SMG now was back then. I mean, I think they ended up buffing the damage to like 15 or something. It doesn't really matter though. This thing was still very bad, and I would consider it probably a bottom 3 SMG we've ever seen. And another weapon, a legacy weapon in Fortnite, one of the longest tenured weapons in the game's history, it's the scoped AR. And I think this is going to be a decently hot take on this video. I think a lot of people really like the scoped AR, but in its infancy stage, this thing was terrible. There was no reason to ever pick up the scoped AR. I mean, even think back to something like Chapter 4 Season OG, right? Was anybody using the scoped AR? I mean, I wasn't. It's actually kind of weird because in the preseason, it launched actually extremely strong, and then they decreased the damage by 33%. So after that damage reduction, this thing saw no use. It's just that fire rate, right? That fire rate is brutal, and you got to remember, this thing was only doing 23 and 24 damage for a scoped assault rifle. Typically, those slow firing, heavy hitting assault rifles do more damage. Something like, I don't know, for example, the thermal scoped AR. But 23 and 24 damage is just terrible. Why would you ever take this thing over like your regular assault rifle or even the burst assault rifle or of course the SCAR? No way, right? They then changed it, I think, in chapter 2. They reduced the ammo from 20 to 15, reduced the fire rate, which is still crazy to me, from 3.5 to 3. It then got a purple and legendary like new model version in chapter 2 season 4. I remember that thing being decent, especially with the new scope, but honestly I think any of the buffs it got just brought it from terrible to like mid. So for me, I was never taking the scoped assault rifle. I was never a fan of this weapon, and for me this was an easy pick to be here. And now we move on to chapter 1 season 2, right? It was basically between two weapons slash items. It was either going to be Cupid's crossbow or the impulse grenade, and I actually went with the impulse grenade here. I think this is going to surprise some people, right? Because I do think that all the crossbows are bad, right? I don't care what it is. Any of the crossbows, Fiend Hunter, Cupid's crossbow, any of it, I think they're all horrible. But I mean, think about it, right? Look at all the mobility we have gotten over the time of Fortnite, right? To me, the impulse grenade has to sit at the very bottom. And I understand it's like a little bit unfair to be so harsh on the impulse grenade when, let's remember, this was essentially the first ever mobility based item in Fortnite history. And items like, I don't know, the shockwave grenade would not have existed if the impulse grenade didn't, right? The impulse grenade basically set the standard for all other mobility items. But you can't lie, right? This thing is not good. Just think about all the other mobility items we have got, right? ODM gear, kinetic blade, Spider-Man's web shooter, shockwave hammer, shockwave grenades, all that stuff. Even like Wings of Icarus, for example, which I still don't think is a good mobility item, but just compare it all to the impulse grenade, right? They are all miles and leagues better than the impulse. It really sucks to put it here because it was a really fun weapon. I remember seeing all the Dr. Lupo and Ninja Troll clips, right? They were throwing each other off of hills and stuff. It was a really innovative, unique, and really cool item. But once you take off those nostalgia glasses, you can't deny the fact that the impulse grenade was really bad, especially as a mobility only item. And surprisingly, I actually have nothing for chapter 1 season 3, so let's move on to chapter 1 season 4. And to me, there was a very obvious pick in chapter 1 season 4. It's the thermal scoped assault rifle. I remember they brought it back recently, and I think some of the players who never used it in chapter 1 and got the chance to use it in the like newer era of Fortnite really like the thermal scoped AR. For me, I can never get around to liking this weapon. I just think it's an objectively bad weapon. To me, it kind of screams more of like a DMR or a marksman rifle than an assault rifle. And we all know how I feel about DMRs. I feel like they don't really have a good place in the Fortnite meta, and well, they really will never be in the meta. When has a DMR ever been like the go-to meta weapon in Fortnite? It's actually funny because the only like vivid memory I have of using the thermal scoped AR back in the day is for some reason in Sniper Shootout, they decided to put scoped assault rifles in there. I remember the thermal scoped AR was like the god gun in Sniper Shootout, right? And of course, I'm really referring to the season 4 version, which I think was much worse. I think when it came back in chapter 3 with a much faster fire rate, the fire rate went from 1.8 to 4.0, and then they changed the damage from 36-37 to 29-31. That's basically a rework. Even though I'm not a fan of the weapon, I do think it got better with those updates. But to me, the thermal scoped AR was always just a bottom feeder weapon. I mean, think about it, right? A fire rate of 1.8. I mean, is that the slowest fire rate in the history of Fortnite? I don't know. Someone might have to fact check me on that. In a season like season 4 with so many strong weapons, the thermal scoped AR was a bottom feeder. Anyways, I got nothing for season 5, so on to season 6. And what a terrible weapon we got coming up. It's the 6-shooter. Of course, from season 6, and I don't want to spend too much time in my video talking about this weapon because quite frankly, it does not deserve to be talked about for like anything longer than 30 seconds. And also, I mean, the fact that this thing got an exotic version, I mean, I think the marksman 6-shooter is like marginally better than this, but it should have never even existed in the first place. The 6-shooter is just a worse version of the regular revolver. I would rather use the regular revolver 10 out of 10 times over the 6-shooter. It just wasn't for me, right? I'm gonna keep raging if I keep talking about the 6-shooter, so I guess I'll stop talking about it now. This weapon was a mega L weapon. Big doom for me. Next, let's move on to season 7, and surprisingly, I actually have a couple weapons for this season, and I say surprisingly because I actually love this season. This is one of my favorite seasons in all of Fortnite. But we gotta talk about the infantry rifle real quick, and before you start yelling at me in the comment section, just hear me out, right? And I think some of you guys know where I'm going with this. This version of the infantry rifle, chapter 1, season 7, when it launched, is arguably one of the worst weapons we've ever gotten. In a recent video, I just talked about the lever action rifle, right? And I compared that to the launch version of the infantry rifle. And that's because the infantry rifle was not a hit scan weapon. Now, if you're a chapter 5 player, you might be like, well, what the hell? That's totally normal, right? All we have is non-hit scan weapons, right? Well, that really was not the case back then. And so they decided to add a rifle, right? That was not hit scan, so it would take time. You basically had to lead your shot, right? It had no scope. It did very minimal damage and had this super like bouncy vertical recoil. I don't really know how to explain it. I mean, I think the video will explain it for itself. I remember like vividly watching a Lachlan video when this weapon came out, and I'll try my best. Like maybe I'll be able to find that video and make it the gameplay for this selection. And he's just sitting there like how do I use this weapon? It is just atrocious. Obviously, that M1 Grand ping when you reload, that is really satisfying. I can't lie. But it was converted to hit scan in season 8, and that's also when we got introduced the epic and legendary rarities, and those are not the weapons that I am talking about for this placement. The epic and legendary hit scan infantry rifle is probably up there as a top 10 assault rifle we've ever gotten. But I mean, that season 7 version on launch was absolutely brutal. And for my other selection in season 7, I'm gonna go with a weapon. Well, not really a weapon, actually an item that you 100% forgot about. It's gonna be bottle rockets. If you guys never got to use bottle rockets, I mean, if you could think about like airstrikes, right, that item, this is semi the same thing. It's just, oh man, this thing is brutal. It's so bad that like, again, I don't even want to waste time talking about it. You just threw down like a bunch of firecrackers that would basically just land in one spot. They wouldn't move. They wouldn't like spray over a wide area. It was just one tiny area, right? So if someone threw a bottle rocket, what would you do? Literally just take 5 steps to the right and the entire item would be useless. Again, like, I don't want to spend any more time talking about this item because it was just that bad. There's not a ton to say. It was literally terrible. So yeah, I mean, I don't think any of you exist out there, but if there are any bottle rocket fans, please just, I'm sorry for what I said about your boy here, but he deserves it, all right? And yeah, that's all I got for season 7. I have nothing for season 8, so let's go on to season 9. And for me, season 9 felt like kind of an experimental season, right? You could tell they were adding a bunch of brand new, really wacky, crazy items. Maybe a little bit of a precursor to Season X, right? But one of those absolutely insane items that I can't even believe ever existed. You saw it on the thumbnail of this video. It is the Storm Flip. And I will actually say with the Storm Flip, this is actually a genius idea. It is really, really smart. I actually think it was quite ahead of its time, right? If you don't know what the Storm Flip did, well, I mean, it does exactly what the name says. You throw it in the zone and it creates like a safe place in the storm. And then of course, if you throw it within the circle, within the safe zone, it spawned like a little storm inside of like that big dome bubble. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. It was actually a 5-tick, right? So if you could catch somebody hiding in a box or maybe sitting in like the top of a house, Storm Flip could probably kill them. Unfortunately, it's just a little bit too niche, right? It's just like there's only really one situation where this is ever useful. Like if you're running from the storm to the safe zone, you're really weak, throw a Storm Flip and it spawns like a safe area for you to heal or hang out or do whatever. Other than that, I mean, like, I guess if you have a really loaded end game, you could throw it at like the bottom, right, of a box and then it spawns upwards and it forces everybody to move. I could see it being useful there, but other than those two like really, really specific scenarios, I don't see the Storm Flip being useful. And I think we saw that in Season OG, right? If I remember, I think it came back in Season OG and it was not good. I will always applaud them for trying new things, right, and being super creative with items like this. It was a really cool idea for the time, and maybe with a little bit of a rework, I could see it being a little bit better. But anyways, the next weapon from Season 9 we gotta talk about is the Burst SMG. No, not the Thunder Burst SMG. It's the white version of that weapon. We are talking about the Season 9 version, and this thing was really, really bad. And I gotta say, I'm probably gonna keep this one as brief as I can because I feel like out of any weapon in Fortnite history, I really talk about this one the most. I mean, it was in my ranking every SMG video, revisiting some of the worst SMGs. It was in my worst one season wonder video, and here it is again. And if you've watched all those videos, I'm sure you've seen the same laser beam clip just floating around in there. I use the same clip, all right? Save some storage for me. Yeah, to me, it was just plain bad, especially with the combat shotgun being like the main meta shotgun that season. There was really no need to hold an SMG. I felt like that the whole season. Like, really, SMGs in the entirety of Chapter 1, Season 9 were pretty bad because, again, you really had, if I remember, the tac shotgun and the combat shotgun were like your main two, right? Essentially, two shotguns where you never need to carry an SMG because they are fast fire rate weapons. It was just brutal, right? I mean, bad recoil, bad damage. You'll see it in the laser beam video. I'm sure I'll use it, right? And he literally puts like the poop emoji over the weapon. He's like, this thing is awful. And yeah, I would agree with him. And for my final selection of this entire series, actually, from Chapter 1, Season X, it's the Auto Sniper. It honestly feels kind of weird even calling this a sniper. I mean, let's be real. It's basically just a glorified DMR. And actually, I think people would look at it better if it didn't have sniper in the name and it was actually just considered a DMR, because when you try to use this thing at sniper ranges, well, it didn't really work. It was actually so bad on launch that within like a week into Season X, they actually increased the damage by 9 in every single rarity. If I remember correctly, they actually brought it back in Chapter 2, Season 8. I think they nerfed the damage by like 3 or 4 at that point. It's just not a good weapon, right? In a season that was really dominated by, I would say, close quarter engagements because you had mechs all over the place. An auto sniper was just not there to take, right? You just should never have touched this weapon. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't, and I don't think a lot of other people did as well. Although I guess I could see why you liked using it. It was pretty satisfying to use, pretty satisfying to hit shots. It had a decent fire rate and a pretty nice zoomed out scope, but yeah, for me, it was not it. And yeah, guys, that marks the end of the video, revisiting some of the worst weapons from Chapter 1. If you haven't seen the other parts to this series, please go check them out. They are all great videos, and they are all set up and structured exactly like this. So if you love this video, you're gonna absolutely love those as well. Thank you to everybody who went out and watched every single video in this series. It was super fun to make, and I promise you guys, I have been working on some massive videos behind the scenes that you guys are going to absolutely love. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because you're gonna want to be there for some of these videos I have coming out in the next couple of weeks. With all that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.